Chances are if you're watching this video, you drive a vehicle daily from point A to point B. Do you maintain your vehicle? Today we're going to talk about oil changes, why we should change our oil, how often we should change our oil, and why you should change your own oil. Oil can be compared to water in the human body. Water is there to prevent friction between your muscles, and if you're dehydrated, you can imagine you feel pretty awful, your muscles start to get overheated, and it hurts you. Same thing with a vehicle. The oil is there to prevent friction inside the engine. The engine operates at 200 to 250 degrees Fahrenheit, so you can imagine engine oil is completely vital to the engine operation and smooth maintenance. If you don't do your oil change, what happens? Well, if you don't do your oil change at proper intervals, you can cause what's called engine sludge, or buildup inside the engine. It's rough stuff that causes a really nasty plaque inside the engine. You don't get the lubrication properties as the oil is intended. The engine starts to overheat, and you can break internal components. It's really difficult to maintain and repair. You have two options. Again, you're very limited here. You can either do an engine replacement, which costs thousands of dollars, or you can rebuild an engine, which costs maybe a $1,500 to $2,000 charge. The engine rebuild, they take it out, put the engine back together, but you don't necessarily get the same engine you started with, and you still have somewhat of the plaque left over. So the best thing to do is follow up on your maintenance. So how often should you do your maintenance? Depending on what kind of oil you use, your intervals are going to change. There's non-synthetic, synthetic, and synthetic blend oils, 3 different types for your vehicle. If you use non-synthetic oil, it's 3,000 miles or every 3 months, whichever comes first. If you use synthetic blend or synthetic oil, it's usually 5 to 7,500 miles or 6 months, whichever comes first. A note here, you always want to look in your vehicle's owner manual to ensure that you get the proper interval for your car. So why should you change your own oil? Well, it's simple. Changing your own oil is fun, it's easy, you save money, so it's thrifty, especially in this economy. It's a good experience, and it keeps you in touch with your vehicle. Next, we're going to talk about the components you need to work on the plane. So now we're ready to do the oil change. These are the basic items that I recommend that you have when you're ready to do the change. First, you're going to want to get your oil. The new oil, you want to check the specifications in your car to make sure you have the proper amount. Next, you're going to want the new oil filter. That also has a specification as defined by the car, so you want to make sure you have the right size, the right oil filter. Of course, you want to have ramps, depending on if you have a car or a truck. You may use a lift, a hydraulic lift, but I use the ramps for this vehicle, and it allows me to clearance underneath the car to change the oil when the time comes to it. I have a 3/8 drive ratchet and a socket. This is a socket wrench that's perfect for taking off the drain plug in the back of the car, and the bottom of the oil pan rather. Anytime I work on the vehicle and I'm looking up, I use safety glasses. That's so nothing gets in your eye. Nobody's going to laugh at me, and I'm going to keep my eyesight for the rest of my life. You're going to want a flashlight. If you're working underneath the car, it's a little dark. It also allows you to take a look around and make sure that you can inspect what you're looking at down there. It's optional, but you can use an adapter for the oil filter. This goes on the end of the ratchet, and it's a socket adapter. It makes it easy to remove the oil filter when the time comes to it. I'm not going to use it tonight. Again, there's a grip on the bottom of the oil filter. It makes it easy for installation and removal. If you don't want to get dirty like me, you can use gloves. These are nylon gloves. I also have shop rags to clean up after myself. Important things for me, I like using a funnel. It's less messy than just dropping it in. And I have a drip pan underneath, a big metal pan. It saves the oil from getting on the ground and staining the concrete. And I also use a drain pan. Now we're going to take a look at how to do the oil change. After you've gotten your tools together and you're ready to do the oil change, the first step is getting the vehicle on a lift or on a ramp. If you're using a ramp and your vehicle's an automatic, you slowly get up the ramp safely, you put the vehicle in park, and you place the parking brake on. If the vehicle is a manual, you put it in gear and place the parking brake on. Just make sure you do it safely. The next step when you get under the vehicle is you want to locate the engine oil pan. On this vehicle, the Acura TL, this is the engine oil pan, and then you have your drain plug. You want to position your oil drip pan and your oil drain pan underneath and back a little bit so the flow allows to go into the drain plug, or the drain pan. Next, you'll take your ratchet and you'll loosen the drain plug, just like that. Once it's loosened, you can finger loosen it the rest of the way. Now, be cautious, the engine oil is going to be hot, so you don't want to burn yourself. And if you do this right, this is why I wear gloves, you can get the drain plug out and allow the oil to drain. The next step, after you've allowed your oil to drain sufficiently and it's down to a small drip like this, you take your rag and you can clean off around the plug and just make sure you get the excess oil in there. You're going to be doing this again in a minute anyways. But the next thing you want to take is the drain plug, and you want to make sure you use the shop rag and get that drain plug clean of all the old oil. Dip your finger in a bottle of the new oil and you want to coat the threads of the drain plug. Once the threads have been coated, put it back into the hole in the oil pan and finger tighten the drain plug. Next, you're going to want to take the shop rag, again, clean up the excess oil, and use your socket to tighten down, hand tight, and an extra quarter turn if you can get it. That's on there pretty good. So now we'll move on to the oil filter. The next step is you want to locate your oil filter on the vehicle. Mine is right here. It's hard for video purposes, you can't see, but you just reach in and you loosen it. You may need the wrench to loosen it, but in this case it's got the grip underneath and I'm able to loosen it with my hands. Once you have the oil filter loosened, you want to make sure to keep the top side up. It's spilling oil already, so I'm going to let it drain for a second. This can be the messiest part of the oil change. Once you're able to loosen it completely, you bring it straight down and you pour it out into the pan. Just like before, you'll let it drain out for a minute or two, then you'll clean it up. Once you sufficiently let the oil filter drain out, you'll take the new oil filter and with new oil on your fingertip, you'll go across the gasket of the new oil filter. This allows it or prevents it from drying out when you put the new one back in. You want to take your shop rag and clean up the area where it drained upon removing the old oil filter. Next, you'll take the oil filter top side up and you'll feel where it goes into place. Screw it into place, hand tight, and if you need to use a wrench, screw it on, use the wrench to hand tighten it, and then add one more quarter turn to get the proper torque. In this case, we'll use our hand and 1/4 turn, and that's how you install the oil filter. Now that you got the hard part out of the way underneath the vehicle, you can move to the top of the vehicle. This is where we fill the oil. So you'll start by taking the oil cap off. If you're using a funnel, this is the time to place the funnel down into the oil cap's hole, and you'll start by adding your oil. Now, this takes a little bit, so while you're letting your oil add in, this is the time you want to perform your visual inspection. You want to look for things like your fluids, your washer fluid, your coolant. You want to check your brake fluid level, and you want to check your power steering if you have that in your car. On this car, I'm not going to do that because you have all the shielding around. That's for another time outside of the 10 minutes. But those are things that you want to check. That's why it's good to have a flashlight. You can look in the areas, and I check the basic wiring, make sure no squirrels or rats have chewed it up, and just make sure that everything looks in place. And usually you can tell when a component's broken. If you're not a mechanic, there's a lot of stuff there to look at, but it's kind of common sense when you see something that looks broken. You can always ask somebody who knows what they're doing. So it's great to go to a mechanic in that case. Now that we've fast forwarded through 4.5 quarts of oil being put into the car, we're ready to go ahead and finish up. When you're done with your last bottle of oil, you can take it and throw it out. You remove your funnel and you put your oil cap back on. This is a big thing. Sometimes people forget it and it makes a mess. The last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my oil stick. I'm going to clean it off. And each oil stick is different, the dipstick as we call it, but you can see on here there's a level low and high, and you want to be somewhere between the low and high. So now you know how to do your own oil change. You've inspected your own car out, you've seen under the vehicle, on top of the vehicle, in the engine bay, and now you feel comfortable with what you drive. You can be proud of saving a little bit of money, and I hope you had fun in the process. Thank you for walking through the car's oil change with me. I'm Robert Quinn. This is speech 219.